We're gonna look at the ADHD in a different perspective today. This will be unique, so let's just dive in. I pulled out an article about ADHD and we are going to analyze it. We're gonna just go deep. What is ADHD? I'm giving you a definition of that. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is a condition that affects focus, impulsivity, and energy levels. People with ADHD may struggle to concentrate, act without thinking, or feel restless. It is often diagnosed in children but can continue into adulthood. Scientists believe ADHD is mostly caused by genetics, meaning it runs in families. I'm not going to read the whole article, but specific part of it. Brain structure and function also play a role. Environmental factors like exposure to toxins, premature births, or early childhood trauma can also contribute. So, this gives you a definition pretty much. I wondered where it started first. It started with an article Scottish doctor Alexander Crichton wrote about people with mental restlessness. It was in 1798, and British pediatrician Sir George described something similar. Described children with behavior problems similar to ADHD. In 20th century, it is called minimal brain dysfunction, hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. Then it became attention deficit disorder. Then in 1994, they updated to ADHD to include hyperactivity as a key feature. Why is ADHD is so common now? Because of better awareness that parents, teachers are super aware, they say. That's why they recognize the symptoms, unfortunately. Modern lifestyles require long periods of focus, like school and office work, which highlight ADHD struggles. Social media and self diagnosis. Many people relate to ADHD symptoms they see online and seek formal diagnosis. Social media. We watch a video and we diagnose ourselves, or maybe go to the doctor after that. But probably it is overdiagnosed, so people are just watching some stupid video and just telling, oh, I have ADHD too, and stuff like that. I want you to focus on something here. So it says modern lifestyles require a long focus from you. Once I just saw that, I definitely realized something here. You may as well think differently by shifting your perspective here. What if you are just different? Or what if you are just normal in a different way? What if there is nothing wrong with you? What if your brain functions differently, but it is not actually a disorder, mental disorder? See, modern lifestyles diagnose you ADHD because you don't have long periods of focus at school or at work. It is like they have created this thing for you that you have a mental disorder because you don't have long periods of focus. You cannot sit still at work. You find it boring, repetitive. You cannot sit still at school. Maybe there is something wrong with the system, not with you. How about that? Because sitting at school for hours or sitting at work for hours is not something natural, not only for people who diagnosed with ADHD, but also not for anyone. It is not a natural thing. Now I want you to pay attention to this ADHD is often underdiagnosed in countries where mental health awareness is lower or where cultural beliefs view hyperactivity and inattention as behavioral issue rather than medical conditions. Because I asked that why less people are diagnosed in different countries, why US is very popular about that. And that's the answer it's given me, that they consider this as behavioral issues and view hyperactivity and inattention as behavioral issues. What if it is behavioral issue? What if you diagnose kids with hyperactivity? What if they are just active kids? They are just normal. It is really popular nowadays. Until 5 years old, you cannot diagnose any kid with hyperactivity, but they still do. They diagnose kids even under 5 years old. They don't care. Looking at the definition of this thing that they have created, they put a label on it, they put a name on it. I see this as a behavioral issue, not as a medical condition. It is like, for example, the cute aggression is just a thing in psychology. It is not a mental disorder. Nobody is getting treatment for that. ADHD is the same. They cannot cure it. Somehow they don't consider this as a behavioral issue in Western countries, let's say. It says here the reason why it is less common in different countries like Middle East or Asia, post-Soviet countries like Azerbaijan. It is less common because limited mental health resources, fewer specialists trained to diagnose and treat ADHD, cultural stigma. Some societies view hyperactivity as disobedience rather than a medical condition. Educational differences. School system may not emphasize identifying learning differences in the same way Western countries do. I don't know what they mean by that. I don't think people who has this thing, I cannot even call a mental disorder, who has this thing, they don't need to be treated differently, or they don't need to get education in a different way. The role of diet here, processed foods and sugar, they say it doesn't create the ADHD, but it is worsen the hyperactivity in some children. Food sensitivities. I've seen kids that they eat sugar or sweets a lot during the day. They keep running at home and they usually don't go out with their parents. They stay at home most of the time because of their families. And they call this kid a hyperactive kid. And even neurologists, they diagnose this kid as a hyperactive kid. But when I see that kid, I don't see any hyperactivity. I see a kid who wants to just play, who wants to be creative, who just wants to go out and enjoy his childhood. I think excessive sugar and artificial additives, they actually create less focus, hyperactive kids. It's not worsen, it is creating and worsening the situations. Okay, it says here ADHD can't be cured, but it can be managed. Treatments include medication, stimulants like Adderall or Ritalin help improve focus. Till when? Like, till when you are going to use medications to give you a focus? Ask this to yourself. Therapy, behavioral therapy teaches coping skills. Okay, if it's not a behavioral issue, why we are giving them behavioral therapy then, if it's not a behavioral issue at all. Lifestyle changes, regular exercise, good sleep, and a structured routine help manage symptoms. Support systems, schools, and workplaces offer accommodations to help people with ADHD succeed. Okay, let's say that I don't regularly exercise, or I don't sleep good, and I don't have a structured routine, and I consume a lot, I eat a lot, I do binge eating, and I consume a lot of screen time. Like I watch a lot of TV shows, scroll down all day long. How would my focus be? Of course, scattered, screwed up, right? It is impossible to do all those things. And I forgot the sugar. You eat sweets, you drink coffee a lot, you just use social media a lot, you scroll down a lot, and etc. You name it. It is impossible to have a good focus like that. You would just feel like a shit, like any others. So you are not an exception. Before you call yourself that I have an ADHD, check your lifestyle, what you are doing, how you are living, what you are eating, what you are reading, what you are watching. And don't rush into the fact that it is a mental disorder. It might not be a mental disorder. It might be just a behavioral issue. You can actually change your perspective here, because after all, whatever you think, you become that. If you think it's a mental disorder you have, then it is a mental disorder. If you don't focus on that part, just if you change your perspective about that, like it is a behavioral issue, and I'm going to tell you why you need to change your perspective here, because there are a lot of research about that, and there are a lot of books that really helpful, and I find them very true. It is a true perspective. Maybe you've never heard this before. I have a summary of Scattered Minds by Dr. Gabor Maté. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Unlike the mainstream view that ADHD is purely genetic or a simple brain disorder, Maté argues that childhood experiences, stress, and emotional development play a crucial role. Key ideas from the book: ADHD is not just genetic, it is shaped by early life experiences. While ADHD has a biological component, Maté emphasizes that early childhood stress, parental emotional states, and environmental factors strongly influence its development. He argues that ADHD often arises in response to emotional insecurity, especially if a child grows up feeling unheard, disconnected, or overwhelmed by stress. I love this part. Emotional dysregulation is at the core of ADHD. Many people see ADHD as an issue with focus and attention, but Maté suggests that at its core, ADHD is about difficulty with self regulation, both in emotions and behavior. This is why people with ADHD struggle with impulsivity, frustration, and maintaining stable moods. You see? It is self regulation, both in emotions and behavior. Again, it is a behavioral issue, not a mental disorder. Society and modern life make ADHD worse. May believes that modern Western society, with its fast paced, high stress lifestyle, worsens ADHD symptoms. Children today receive less unstructured play, less direct emotional nurturing, and face more pressure to conform to rigid school systems that don't support their natural ways of learning. Parental stress is passed down. The emotional state of parents, especially a stressed or emotionally distant mother, can affect a child's brain development. He argues that ADHD, often found in families with generational stress patterns. This does not mean parents cause ADHD, but rather that stress in early life contributes to its development. Trauma and ADHD are deeply connected. Many people with ADHD have a history of trauma, even if it's not recognized as such. Mate links ADHD with emotional wounds that come from feeling ignored, criticized, or pressured in childhood. This can lead to difficulty in self worth and motivation. Medication is not the only answer, he says. While medication can help manage symptoms, he argues that healing ADHD requires emotional self awareness, therapy, and lifestyle changes rather than just relying on stimulants. He encourages mindfulness, self reflection, and reconnecting with suppressed emotions. Rather than treating ADHD as a disorder to be fixed, he suggests seeing it as a different way of experiencing world. See, as a different way of experiencing the world, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video. Maybe you are just experiencing it differently. You are just normal, but experiencing it differently. One that needs support, not shame. ADHD individuals are often highly creative, intuitive, and passionate, but they need an environment that nurtures their strengths rather than punishes their struggles. Scattered Minds challenges the common view of ADHD as a purely biological disorder and instead presents it as a condition shaped by childhood environment, stress, and emotional experiences. His approach emphasizes self understanding, healing emotional wounds, and creating a more supportive society rather than just relying on medication. This is even more interesting. I have a summary of ADHD, A Hunter in a Farmer's World by Tom Hartman. His book presents a unique theory about ADHD, arguing that it is not a disorder but an evolutionary trait. Listen up. He suggests that people with ADHD are naturally inclined toward a hunter mindset, while most of society is structured for farmers. This perspective challenges the traditional view of ADHD as a dysfunction and instead frames it as a difference in cognitive style that can be both advantageous and challenging depending on the environment. So, you could be just a hunter, not a farmer. But society wants you to fit in a farmer position, wants you to be in that environment, to work in that environment, which is not working for you. So, in modern society, schools and workplaces favor farmer traits, making life difficult for hunters, which is you. He proposes that ADHD traits such as impulsivity, high energy, distractibility, and hyperfocus were once highly beneficial for hunters in ancient societies. Hunters needed to be constantly alert to their surroundings, able to notice small details and act quickly. So it was a survival trait, survival instinct, not a mental disorder. It was a evolutionary survival traits, not a mental disorder. He argues that ADHD individuals thrive in fast-paced, unpredictable, and high-stakes environments. When placed in rigid school systems or repetitive jobs, people with ADHD struggle because these environments were not designed for their natural way of thinking. Natural way of thinking. They think differently. They think differently. You think differently. You are normal, but you are just thinking differently. Can you see that? You don't have a medical disorder, mental disorder, but you are just thinking differently, acting differently. You see a world with a different perspective. That's how you should be seeing yourself. School requires sitting still, listening for long periods, and following rules, things that hunters are not wired for. I don't think anyone is wired for whatever school requires. Many jobs involve repetitive tasks, organizations, and time management. Any kid shouldn't be sitting 6 hours at school because this is against our nature. That's why when my son came to me saying, my classmate is so naughty and teachers get annoyed by him, he's always doing all sorts of stuff and they don't like him, etc. All I said to him that being naughty doesn't mean he's a bad boy. He's just naughty and he's a kid. He's just learning. He's just a little maybe different than you. But he's your classmate. And he was the most fun kid in the school, I'm telling you. He was just so funny and like he had that acting skills. He just didn't like the rules. And I think that is okay. I don't find this like global as a global issue, like kids are kids. That's how they're supposed to be. I realized that I should be looking at here. Instead, I was looking here. Great. Now you have a different perspective for your thing, for your condition, whatever you call it. But please don't call it mental disorder because that's not it. It's better if you change your perspective from mental disorder to a behavioral issue, or better, evolutionary difference, as Hartman puts it. Evolutionary difference. You have an evolutionary difference. You are just thinking differently, acting differently, and that's all. That is all. That was your survival evolutionary traits. You are evolutionary different than others. Maybe we think as farmers, you think as hunters, and that's all you are, and nothing wrong with you. Please don't label yourself and don't just watch any video about that and label yourself and thinking that, oh, you have this psychological issue, you have that mental disorder, mental illness, whatever. It is not a joke anymore. I see some people are just calling themselves, oh, I have an ADHD, because they are getting maybe more attention. It's not worth it. It is not worth it. Just please don't label yourself. And if you think about sickness, you become sick. If you change your focus from sickness to health, you become healthy. That's how simple. You become what you think about all day long. So you better think about health. You better focus on health. All right. Stay healthy. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in another video. Please share this video whoever you think needs it the most. Thank you.